Well, I'm glad you're all here. It sounds like there's a lot of engineers here, which is excellent. I did environmental sciences and took a lot of environmental engineering classes at Cal. And then I went on to get a master's in public health, and I did field research in Guatemala. I also studied abroad in South Africa. So I've had various roles within the UC that have also taken me off campus. And this is an exciting new project because I get to promote a lot of sort of best practices and to share resources. And we will go through quite a range of issues here, and we might not be able to go in a ton of detail on a lot of your specifics, but I want to make sure that you're all aware of resources and steps that we can take moving forward to help your research groups and where to find that information if you do need help. So before we move forward, let's see, these are some of the topics. These are our goals. We're going to try to touch on all of these in this workshop. Before we get into the details, I would like to just acknowledge a couple incidents. This happened before I worked for UC, but does anyone recall this tragedy, this incident? Perhaps it was still here or would like to share about it. Kitty, can you go ahead? Yeah. Do you mind just briefly, like what?
Gary Polis, faculty member, was down in Baja, California with an expedition which included some of his staff, his grad students, and some visitors, researchers from Japan, and they were on boats, and the seas got rough, and it didn't turn out well for some.
Right. So what I've read about it, there was one faculty and then 4 others that died in this boating accident off of Mexico. So that was a UC Davis research expedition. And last year, many of you may be familiar with an incident that happened in Ethiopia. Sharon Gray, I believe is her name, that was killed while visiting or going to a meeting in Ethiopia, and her car was pummeled with stones and she was killed. So these incidents do happen. They're very rare, but there certainly is inherent danger in travel. There's a whole range of issues that have happened within UC. We've had hantavirus cases. We've had people die of carbon monoxide poisoning. We've had multiple vehicle accidents. There's a lot of this is inherent to travel. But what I want to focus on in this workshop are things that we can do to help prepare and be informed so that we can make good decisions, because conditions and situations do change when you're out in the field. That's one of the gists. That's why you do field research. It's an uncontrolled environment. And there's some things that are not under your control while you're out there. But if you have training and plans are in place, you know what your resources are, that may help to make decisions to manage those situations. So that's kind of my goal, is to help people kind of think about those situations so they're better informed and have the confidence to reach out to resources and maybe step back when needed. So we're going to start kind of broadly and then narrow in. So some basics about our UC travel insurance. If you book through Connexus, you're automatically enrolled. A lot of people book their own travel. So there is a web portal called UC Away where you can register your trip. The reason I put 100 miles is travel insurance kicks in when you're more than 100 miles from your normal home work address, campus, or if people are at field stations, that's their normal work address. So travel insurance kicks in. Most of the risk managers, and is there anyone here from risk management today? Not yet, okay. They typically promote it for when you leave the state. So there's a little bit of this gray area where you're covered, but they're not necessarily capturing that information unless you're leaving the state. So you should be able to register. There's no harm in doing that. If I rent a car in Southern California through Connexus, I'm registered in the system. So I think that's the difference between the 100 miles and the out of state. But registering it, what it gets you is an email that then has travel insurance information from our travel insurance providers, emergency numbers and support that are 24/7, and then you'll get emails about your destination. You'll get a trip brief that provides a summary of location intelligence, medical services, a lot of practical information. And then if conditions change, if there's some kind of alert or something going on, a big storm while you're traveling, they will send you updates. It's an automatic system based on your location and the dates that you're there. It's really important when you register to make sure your profile is up to date. So your phone number, your email, that you can be reached at when you're traveling, because that's where they're going to send it to. So that's a service that's provided for everyone in UC for free.
So yeah, I'm a new professor here, so I've used this before, but we don't have to pay for travel insurance.
Nope.
When you register with this, you are automatically
Yeah,
given
you
travel
automatically have travel insurance, and there's even a bit of a window. Like if you're going somewhere, like I tend to, if I travel, add on a few personal days and go do something else and take advantage of that area. You're covered for a certain amount of time before and after your trip as well, and that's a benefit just being affiliated with UC. So again, yeah, it's education abroad. A lot of organized groups are using this, and a lot of independent field researchers aren't as familiar with it, but it's free and can be very helpful in a lot of situations. On top of that, so that's really based on your location and the dates that you're traveling. On top of that, what we're really trying to encourage is more field safety planning for work in remote areas, or if you're doing hazardous work off campus. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that. And by remote areas, a lot of the places that you're going to, they may not be that remote. If it's nearby, if you have good cell phone reception, if you can call 911 and get there, that might not be considered that remote. But if you're doing hazardous work while you're there, if you're working with equipment or handling hazardous materials or doing wildlife studies, there may be tasks as part of your work that it would be appropriate to do a field safety plan. So all of you may have picked up a copy. That's a template that's been adapted from a version we've been using at Berkeley for a while. And it's a work in progress. And we definitely would appreciate feedback on parts of it that can be improved. And it's a Word document, so it can be easily modified. So every year I've been trying to improve it a little bit as we get more feedback. Most people that have filled it out already have said, like, this is a good exercise, we should know all this stuff already. But there's a difference between that and actually kind of documenting it and sharing it with your group and leaving it with someone on campus, which is kind of what we're working towards. So going back to the travel insurance, when you register, this is sort of a screenshot. This is where I did work in Guatemala, and this is a bit old now, but you get a security rating. You can link to a trip brief. You can link to a health brief that really talks about vaccinations or medical services. There's a lot of information in here. This is a national service that UC subscribes to, so it's not just for us. There's a lot of corporations and other groups using this as well. So that's kind of what the screenshot looks like. There's also a mobile app available. So once you register for a trip, you can download the app, and I have it on my phone, and then you can look up this information while you're traveling as well. So it's pretty handy, and it also has the emergency numbers on the main page. So if you haven't used that before, most people that use it are very happy with it. So some other issues before you go. Location intel, local norms. I mean, there's nothing better than having a reliable local contact and relationships that you've built to help you prepare. Medical considerations, you can get a lot of that information from these trip briefs. But again, that's based on location. So if you're doing work, or perhaps you're going high altitude, or you're going to Africa and need malaria prophylaxis. Perhaps you're going to an area where, traveler's diarrhea is very common and you want to get a prescription for Cipro before you go. Those type of issues, those medical considerations, on campus, the occupational health clinic is a good resource. And then if you're a student, through student health, the travel clinics, those type of services are very well set up for education abroad and a lot of other groups. But for international researchers, there's often kind of a gap there. But there are resources available, and the number for occupational health is on that template. Has anyone here used them for any trips? You don't need to share any specific medical issues, but is that a common thing the researchers here are using? I think that's something that would be great to promote, because at Berkeley we use them quite a bit. Even I used to be on our IACA committee at Berkeley, and people that are doing bat research or are going to Africa, a lot of them will send them to the clinic before, and they get their physicals, and they do kind of consultation about where they're going, and if they need vaccinations, they'll cover all that. Pretty sure you have that resource here as well. A fairly new website for people working internationally, and I know that's just a subset of all you, but it's UCGo. It's ucglobaloperations.org, and it started at a UCSF Global Health, but it's being expanded to promote resources for global activities across the system, so for a lot more disciplines. And there's a lot of central guidance there on like export controls, hiring people internationally, contracts, legal issues, the whole range of issues that you have to deal with when you work internationally. So it's not perfect yet. We're trying to improve it, and there's a lot of people helping from different departments. But I encourage you, if you haven't gone to that site, to check that out. And then for high-risk travel destinations, if you, if you see from your trip brief that it's a 4 or 5, that's considered high-risk travel, or there's other concerns about the location you're going to, there is central guidance and support. Philip Van Son can provide pre-travel security risk planning, contingency plans. They have pretty extensive support for certain situations. I mean, there are definitely researchers that are going into areas where they're carrying like a tracker that is being monitored by someone, and they have boundaries. If they go out of that area, there's alerts. There's a lot of potential security controls that can be put in place for really specific situations if it's warranted. So if you are concerned that you have people going to a high-risk travel destination, that is a good resource to tap into. And often it goes through your risk manager. So when you register, if you're going to a country that has a high-risk alert, a 3 or a 4, that gets flagged by the risk managers, and they'll reach out to you and kind of offer this stuff. But you can also do it earlier in the planning stages. But that's kind of one thing we have in place that is a benefit of the travel registration. And in addition to registering with UC, registering with the State Department is also a very good idea. And I don't want to get political right now. I'm pretty distraught from the past week, and I want to stay professional. But basically, the travel information to get updates is more important now than ever, right? I mean, the security situation in a lot of places, airports, all kinds of things, it's a little bit up in the air right now. So it's more important than ever to be getting updates before you travel as well as while you're traveling. So registering with the State Department, it's called the STEP program, and then you'll get updates directly from the State Department as well as ours. Those would both be good steps that you could take. Are there any other sort of pre-travel things that people do that are working internationally that they think might be helpful for others here at Davis? Do you all have an international affairs office? At Berkeley, it's called Global Engagement Office, but sometimes there's like a central office that can support collaboration with other institutions. And okay, that might be something I can find out about that. Global Affairs. Maybe it's called Global Affairs here.
Provost level.
Yeah, they can be a good resource as well, especially if you're starting a new project in a country and don't have like well-established local relationships. They can help put you in touch with other people within UC that are doing work in that area. So that's something good to reach out to in some situations. Okay, so we're going to focus more on specific health and safety actions related to your specific projects now. And the field safety plan template that I've passed out, there's a range of issues there. It's really designed to be a hazard assessment tool and an emergency plan for work off campus. And because there's a whole range of what people are doing, it's designed to be pretty simple but scalable and flexible. You can delete parts that aren't relevant to you. You can refer to other protocols. You can refer to your animal protocol. You can refer to resources that may already be available at the site that you're going to. So it's just a place to document this and then discuss it with other people on your trip. The idea is that you leave a copy, or at least send a copy to someone on campus as well, that you have a campus contact that you're able to check in with, and that they know the frequency of how often you're going to check in. And that's kind of a new idea for some people. A lot of field researchers just go rogue for months at a time. Certainly when I worked in Guatemala, we went for probably a whole month without ever talking to our PI about anything, and that was kind of the norm. But there certainly could be a lot of things going wrong during that time, right? So we're trying to encourage more check-in and more support as needed. So having a couple of the key things that I'd like to point out: having a local contact, having a university contact, knowing where your nearest medical facilities are, knowing what resources are nearby, acknowledging access issues, weather, in addition to the actual tasks and the work that you're doing, can all be documented in here. And the go, no-go criteria in particular is something that is new for a lot of people to kind of think about and document formally. And the idea of a no-go criteria is because there's changing conditions, because there's storms, because there's floods, because there's potentially political or social issues. The idea is that you identify up front some issues that would be like, okay, we would need to alter our plans, we would need to adjust to accommodate this. And they can be physical. Does anyone know where these pictures are from? Point Reyes. Yeah, so this was an incident a couple years ago at Point Reyes where the whole cliffside, and we have biology classes that go out to this exact area actually. The whole cliffside collapsed and a hiker was killed and someone else was injured in this situation. So when I'm talking about no-go criteria, it could be conditions, it could be situations, it could be heat level, it could be things that you can measure. It could be out of bounds areas. It could be that we're going to this, it's dangerous over there, we don't want people going over there. It could be a whole variety of things. So what I'd like to do right now is for you to turn to your neighbor and talk about what some no-go criteria may be for your work that you're doing. And I put this grid up. This is used in a lot of risk management type settings. This grid is basically the likelihood of an accident, the consequences of an accident happening. So low, high, low, high. They're both low, go, you're good to go. Not very high risk. It gets tricky when there's high likelihood of something happening, but it's kind of low consequence. It's hot out. We may have the risk of heat illness, sunburn, those type of things, but we can manage it, so we're going to go. We're going to prepare. Versus low likelihood of it happening, but high consequence, that gets a little bit trickier. Those things potentially could be mitigated. And then we have the red situation, the high likelihood of happening, high consequence of happening. That's where it's like, stop, this is a dangerous situation, we need to change our plans. Your risk tolerance personally may be very much higher than what most people would consider acceptable for work. And I think that that's an area that's very tricky. You may be a backcountry skier, you may do all these things personally, and you're comfortable with that, and you have a high risk tolerance. But if you're taking a group of undergrads out, if you're leading a group, if you're doing research that's representing the university, most people would probably want you to have a higher risk aversion and maybe make some different choices than you would if it was just you. And that's a very tricky area in field research and in field courses. And I've seen many, there's not a clear line. You're out there and you have to make judgments as you go. And everyone's somewhere in there. But it's good to talk with your group before it. It's good to talk with your colleagues, with your course instructors, to talk with others about sort of how you deal with different situations so that when they do arise, you can make informed decisions and have a plan on how you're going to manage it. Okay, so with that, please, you can turn to someone next to you and just talk a little bit about, in your setting or somewhere, you can think of a scenario of someone else that you've supported if you're at the department level. What would be some no-go criteria of a situation where you think you need to? Did anyone have a good environmental criteria that they would stop their work, some type of environmental condition that they discussed?
High wind?
High winds, yeah, definitely if you're doing boating. What about a temperature? I know you all can handle the heat better out here than I can from Berkeley, but I've often seen people put a temperature on there, like, if it's above, and this choice varies, but.
The challenge with that, Sarah, is that we have people who are in air-conditioned offices, air-conditioned labs, air-conditioned shops, year-round, working on something, and then go out into 115 degrees.
Right.
And it's very difficult to do 4 to 14 days of acclimation.
Yeah, absolutely.
To get the data that you need in a 14-hour window.
So we don't have air conditioning in Berkeley, so maybe we acclimate better because we don't have those extremes. But I mean, it's a serious issue for people that are often, in campus environments and then go out to Death Valley to collect samples or something, and they're not used to those conditions. So definitely environmental conditions could be no-go, or that you have to modify, or that you're like, okay, well, we're going to finish our work, we're going to get up really early and finish our work before 9, and then take a long break and then do it again. Things like that are very common to document in here. I think having a good support system back on campus with your PI, with your department, so that those decisions can be made, and it's not just a person out there alone deciding, and that support system is going to help to promote the best decisions. But in some situations, you might not be in touch, you might not be able to rely on those resources, and people are going to need to make decisions on their own. So those are all good examples. Storms could certainly present an issue if there's a a big storm warning or high probability that a storm's headed to an area. I mean, the potential scenarios are huge, but the idea is that you're thinking about what's relevant to your work and what things you have control over and what you need to kind of build in some flexibility in your project to be able to accommodate that. Illness is a big one. I mean, I've traveled quite a bit in Mexico and Central America, and I mean, pretty much got sick at some point often, right? And so having some flexibility, are you really going to be able to travel across the country on this day on a bus if you're sick? You might need to have some flexibility if people get ill to be able to care for them and let them recover and rest. If you get the Cipro, you recover pretty quickly, but still, there's a lot of unknowns there, and certainly things could be more serious as well.
Pesticides, which would be
Yeah,
necessarily
that's a great example.
different in our state, our country, and around the world.
Yeah, but also if it's like a restricted area, you have to be aware of like when they're spraying different areas that you can't go in during that time and have good communication to plan around it. Those signs, in the period after, and those signs, maybe different internationally, but even here, working with the land manager, whoever's managing that, that's a really good example. Okay, let's go into a couple of things where you could maybe help mitigate the issues in those other areas. So how many of you carry first aid kits? Great. Keep your hand up if you have current first aid training. A few of you. Good. Okay, what type of training do you have, if you mind sharing?
The one that we had on campus.
Like CPR, 4-hour CPR. Okay, great. How about in the back there? What type of?
We did the same after
Okay. Is it the wilderness first aid or is it it's just standard CPR, first aid,
Yeah.
American Red Cross, like 4-hour training? Okay. Anyone else? No. So what level of training have you?
Wilderness responder.
You've done the wilderness first responder. Awesome. I am a strong advocate of that training. If you're going to be a field researcher, if this is career, if you're going to want to be working outdoors, I think wilderness first responder is a great investment of time and money. It's a 10-day course. It's very intensive, but you're going to get so much leadership skills from it, and I encourage people to do that. We just had it in Berkeley, and a whole group of students from UC Merced, from the Yosemite Leadership Program, came and did it. They're like 19, 20, 21-year-olds, they got it, and I was really inspired by that because they're going to carry those skills forward. I will actually jump ahead here a little bit. Well, actually, before I do that, so the first aid kits do not help people in themselves. You need to know what's in your kit. You need to know how to use it. You need to customize it for where you're going. If you're going to Kenya, you're probably going to want very different things in it than if you're just going to Sonoma and have fairly reasonable medical services nearby. If you're working in the desert, it's going to be very different than if you're going up to the Sierra Nevada in the winter, or if you're going to Alaska or Antarctica. It also needs to be stocked. You need to replenish the stuff in there. I've heard people suggest having a little plastic bag in them when they're a shared kit, so that when people use things, you see the wrapper and it kind of makes it easier to restock. But usually they do have the contents on the outside, at least the prepackaged ones. You certainly can make your own. It's also good practice if they're ready to go to have the zipper at the top that kind of indicates that it's ready to go and has been restocked. These are kits that we've been promoting at Berkeley for people that do field safety plans. I got kind of a special grant to do it, and they are from NOLS, they're from Wilderness Medicine Institute. And some of the things that are in here that are a little unique are there's one of these. Does anyone, you probably did not use this in your 4-hour American Red Cross. Anyone besides the outdoor ed person know what this is? This is an irrigation syringe, and so when you're in the field, it really helps to clean out wounds with water because it creates a high pressure. And so I honestly use this with my kids all the time because they get, the gravel in their knees and wounds and things like that to clean out dirt. This is a very simple, lightweight thing to have in a first aid kit that can come in really handy. There is duct tape. I'll actually pass this around. There's a small roll of duct tape. There's a CPR shield in here. There are, for the biosafety officer, there are nitrile gloves in here. Throw more in here. There's one pair. So I always recommend that people put more gloves in here because you're going to go through that one very quickly. There's shears. We'll get into this a little bit more later. There's tweezers that are sharp, sharp pointed. Excellent for what? Someone said it over here. Ticks. It can be really helpful to pull out ticks with the sharp ones. There's athletic tape. There's kind of some of the standard stuff, but they tend to have more for wound cleaning. So I like these kits a lot, and they're pretty lightweight. So we've been giving them to a lot of our field courses. Oh, my microphone just went down. So you can pass that around if you'd like. We also get it. There is, yeah. There's small little packs of pretty, common. There's aspirin, there's acetaminophen, there's ibuprofen, like for different situations.
So here on campus, my understanding is that we're not allowed to have any kind of ingestible pain mediators.
In your first aid kits on campus?
Yeah, our first aid
Interesting.
kits.
Yeah.
I thought we were only allowed to have Band-Aids.
Interesting. There's different rules at different places. These definitely have them, and I'd say if you're trained, they will come in very handy if someone's in a lot of pain in the field, or there's anti-diarrheals in there. There's other small packets of med. Yeah, no, that'd be interesting. I think it would be important to talk to your occupational health physician, which is Dr. Belcourt, again, about that, because our physician actually approved these for us, including all the contents. But our first aid kits in our office also have those things, so maybe that's a difference, just in interpretation. Interesting, because even in my office we have, all the little packets as well. So yeah, the wound cleaning, I think, is one of the most valuable things about taking wilderness first aid over standard first aid, as well as a lot of the leadership that you get out of it, a lot of the decision making, a lot of the ideas of how you can be resourceful and deal with situations, deciding whether this is an emergency and you need to get the person out and get medical help right away, or it's something that you can manage and kind of monitor and see if they can continue. And then part of my project that's funded through UCOP, I've been setting up wilderness first aid classes at a variety of sites and on campuses. So this one is at our botanical garden in Berkeley that a bunch of students just came to. We have one actually coming up at Yosemite Field Station in February. It's an 8-hour course, so it's kind of a condensed version of the standard 2-day wilderness first aid, but it's very high quality. The instructors are from Sierra Rescue, and this is open to all UC field researchers and staff. So if you're interested, email me and I can send you the information. There's not a lot of room left in the class. There's a number of people from Merced and some other campuses that are going, but we are trying to get more scheduled, yeah.
You're doing National Safety Week or something.
I'm not a big fan of online first aid training because I really think you need to get the skills and the practice and a little bit of the muscle memory to do it, and also kind of the assessment of it. I think, as a refresher or to complement hands-on training, there could be some benefit, but I think hands-on training is much more valuable and a better use of your time, personally. Yeah, and especially in our groups, people have been learning a lot from each other because they share a lot of lessons and try to, if you have, I'm sure all of you, there's a whole range of issues that you have all dealt with, and as you're going through and practicing scenarios, you learn from each other as well. So I think that's lost in those online trainings. It might be okay for if you get adult CPR and then you take the online supplement for baby CPR, something like the infant CPR, that might be, that seems reasonable. But to do all of it, some hands-on is good.
Sarah, I would add,
Yeah.
generally speaking, the sort of standard is that there has to be in-person skill practice.
Yeah,
specifically.
absolutely.
So you do the online content, but for the
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And this whole course is taught outside. We were not in a classroom once. The whole day is outside, weather permitting. In Berkeley, that's pretty easy to do, and it's excellent. So again, there's a couple classes coming up. Yosemite Field Station, Blodgett Forest, which isn't too far. We're trying to get one set up for June, and I know there are some Davis researchers. That's where UC Forestry is, so that may be convenient for some people from here. We're doing some at UC Riverside, at Berkeley we've done a few of them, at Hastings Reserve. Maybe we'll make it up to some of the other reserves like Hopland or Bodega at some point as well if there's a need. So yeah, so just some good skill building there. The other thing that I've been trying to promote and I got some funding to support is improved satellite communication options. So it sounds like a lot of you are local, but how many of you work in areas where you do not have reliable cell phone reception or support people? Okay. How are people currently communicating with each other? I mean, ideally you have a team, you're watching out for each other, there's a group, but do you have any type of communication option to talk with each other or to get help if needed? Any good? Go ahead.
I use radio.
You have radios? Okay. And how many people are typically in your team?
5 to
5 to 7, okay, that's great. Anyone else? Okay, great. So you have a satellite phone. Is that funded through your department or through your research group? Excellent, excellent, great. The thing with radios are definitely, common and a good solution for many situations. We have, at least at Berkeley, a lot of field biologists and a lot of people that are working alone. Are there people here that are supporting people out in the field that are working alone? Because a field radio, unless you're tied into someone on the other side and there's someone responsive, isn't necessarily going to help you. There's no 911 button. There's no SOS typically on that. And so that's a situation where having a satellite communication could be life-saving and could really help manage a situation. So there's a couple units. Has anyone ever used a spot device before or heard of a spot? So a spot was kind of one of the first sort of affordable options that came out. It works on the Global Star network, and you can basically send GPS coordinates and you can send out pre-programmed text messages via satellite. You cannot receive any feedback though, so you're basically sending out signals and hoping that someone gets it and comes and saves you. The other option that is available now that adds a little bit more user friendliness is the InReach unit, and it allows two-way texting. And so you can actually get response back from authorities or from your supervisor or from other people that you have programmed in here. So it's helpful for a lot of logistics. And it's on the Iridium network, which is much more reliable globally. So we have a lot of researchers using this. It's much more affordable than sat phones in general. Even though sat phones, I mean, if you can get a sat phone and you have it and you have good service, that's ideal because then you can have conversations and really troubleshoot directly. Definitely a benefit to that. These send out text messages, so it's small pockets of information. They do get through often when satellite phones can't hold a conversation. So for reliability in some situations, these may be better. They cost about $300, $350, and the plan per month starts at about $20 a month. So we have groups that have used them in Namibia, in Indonesia, and Madagascar. They're becoming much more common. And I know that this is very small font, but this is just from a random Saturday in the Sierras, the number of responses that were triggered based on coordinates. So this was a spot, like you can signal to response authorities to this, and then it goes through to your local jurisdictions. So in this case, it was Sequoia National Park was notified. They get sent the coordinates of where it's sounding. This was Fresno County Sheriff, Sequoia Kings National Park. This situation, there was a hiking party that suffered a knee injury. Here was an InReach device. Again, it sends the coordinates so they know where you are. And it was transferred to El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. This one is Mono County. So there's a lot of these out there being used, and you don't want to signal SOS for no reason. It needs to be a life-threatening, serious situation, but there will be authorities on the other end that get the signal and can send people to help, and it's basically taking like the search out of search and rescue. Like they know where you are, and they can get to you, and they can help you quicker. So there's a huge benefit to this. Go ahead.
So I just figure, are you saying that these systems are available, supported by the UC, or is this just like, think about this when you're developing your food safety plan as part of like your grant?
Yeah, ideally, if you can budget it into your grant and get this included, that's great, because then you can manage it and you can have it yourself. I did submit a grant to get these units out to the field stations that are remote, so we're about to purchase about 40 of them to get sent out to UC staff that work at the field stations that don't have reliable coverage for them to carry, and then there will be about like 10 units that we're going to be able to provide as kind of loaners for people to try out and test and kind of get familiar with the technology, with the idea that if it works for people, that then they could try to build it into their grant and fund it moving forward, because they are becoming much more common. So yeah, I don't have like a ton of money to be able to buy everyone them, but we're trying to support it and just get people more familiar with it. Ideally, if your department or your funds can include it up front, I mean, it's not a huge, I mean, it's not as much as a sat phone, but it is a significant cost. So if people don't budget for it, then it's hard to add on later. The service plans can be halted also. So if you're not using it, if you only use it for part of the season, you can actually put your service plan on hold and then activate it again. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. Okay, so any questions on this? I'll pass it around. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question here to follow about, I think those devices are awesome as well, and we're just sort of getting into
Yeah.
using with our public participant trips at our
Yeah.
conferences. But I know that James Fitzgerald also
Yeah.
proposes for water plans, a very strong
Yeah.
trip completion plan. Does that also work well in the field safety for folks that can't utilize or buy additional devices, like if they have a way to send a text message to a common number or leave a voicemail when they do get cell service, so that they can say, things are great today,
Yeah.
I'll check back in at 7 p.m. tomorrow, or
Right.
some sort of.
I don't know exactly how he had set it up, but there's a lot of different variations of people setting up communication plans and how they're checking in with each other. A lot of the diving safety officers and the boating safety officers have used the Spot. They have pretty good line of sight to the sky, and they've had generally better reliability with the Spot. When you go into forests and you go into more rugged terrain, they haven't been as reliable, and the InReach is better. So there's preferences on all this type of, any technology, there's always preferences. But they have those as well. That they take and that they provide for a lot of the scientific divers. So they have kind of their own budget to support some of that, which is great. But yeah, I think there's other systems that can be put in place. I don't know exactly about that calling and leaving it. I mean, there has to be someone at the other end kind of monitoring it that you trust.
Yes.
Whereas this goes to authorities, and same as if you were calling 911, goes to public officials that are authorities, local responders, often county or national park or whoever the responder is for that area. I have one other unit that I'll pass around. This is a little bit different. This is a personal locator beacon. So this doesn't allow two-way communication. It just has the SOS button, and this is used a lot in boating. It can be a backup for other systems as well. It's pretty lightweight. And we're in a building, so one thing about SAT communications is you do have to have a line of sight to the sky. So in general, there's not too much worry that you guys are going to accidentally activate this.
Is it water triggered?
It's not water triggered. You have to hit it. You have to hit the button. But again, it sends GPS coordinates. That one you actually register with NOAA directly. They have a whole program where they know exactly who it belongs to.
You may have said, but with these systems, how international are they, or is it really
Yeah.
used in the US?
No, they're designed for international use. The InReach is on the Iridium satellite network, so it has better coverage globally. There are a few countries where satellite communications are not allowed, just for political reasons, because you're bypassing their communication controls. So it's important if you're going to those, like I think China and Russia, a few places, you have to either register them or review that. But for most of the world, physically they work. There might be a couple rules that you have to be aware of.
Going to the local,
Yeah.
local first responder authorities.
Yeah, so
It's a universal system.
yeah, there's like some bunker in Texas where they manage it all out of, and they get the signal, and then they notify whoever the local authorities are. And then if they're registered through UC, they would also let our travel insurance providers know so that they're aware of the situation and can help support, yeah.
How do they communicate with medical evacuation?
Yeah, that's exactly what it would trigger. So this situations like this one resulted in a medevac. This person got helicoptered out because they weren't able to get out on their own. So they don't necessarily send in a helicopter just because you hit that button. There may be a local ranger that comes and assesses and sees what's going on, and then they call for assistance. But it's triggering that. It's triggering medical response and evaluation of what the situation is.
And internationally, that can
Yeah, I mean, your resources are going to be different depending on where you are, but they would try to facilitate that as best they can with the resources there. Yeah, yeah, so it's an excellent technology, but it's having teams, having good coordination and communication among your group. It's not going to always replace that, but certainly if you're in remote areas or if you're working alone or in small groups, it could really mitigate the situation and help you manage it much better. There's some really cool videos, actually, if you go to the InReach website about them in use and different, like in the Nepal earthquake, there were a lot of NGOs that were using them to communicate and check on people and evacuate, and so there's some cool videos there on how that worked. Okay, so I want to make sure we move forward and go through some actual scenarios, and a lot of this stuff is more local as well for those of you that are working in California. So just based on this picture, can anyone figure out where this is? Here in California. It's in a park that has... It's Yosemite, yeah. So this is on the bathroom at Yosemite, and I took the picture because I actually like the "Don't Bonk" sign that says drink lots of water, eat salty snacks, stay on the trail. Because we've been doing a lot of heat illness prevention training, all about drinking water, and people, that do a lot of endurance sports, all about water, but then if they don't drink or they don't, actually eat as well, they can have hyponatremia and have issues as well. So I kind of like that sign. But of course there's hantavirus, there's tick-borne, there's plague diseases. So knowing what's endemic to your site is critical. Just like the CDC is a really good resource for international issues, the California Department of Health Services has a ton of good information for here within California, and they have county sites, and you can look up like the number of hantavirus cases in each county. You can look up the seroprevalence in deer mice that have been collected. There's a ton of information specific to zoonotic and vector-borne diseases here within California. And a lot of people just always rely on the CDC, which is great internationally and nationally, but here within California, that's also a good service, California Department of Health Services. So we mentioned ticks before. So someone that has removed a tick, any suggestions for others? Has someone really good at this? Because I know some people deal with it all the time. I grew up in Humboldt County, and there's some coastal areas where you go on you're covered in ticks, your dog's covered in ticks, like it's just kind of, you deal with ticks a lot. Anyone feel like they're a tick expert here?
I don't know, I pull them straight out.
Yeah, straight out.
Use steady pressure.
Yep.
You don't jerk them, you just give it
Yeah.
slow, steady pressure, and then it just...
Perfect.
Don't
That's
twist.
exactly.
I've
That's
tried all the little, oils and,
Yeah.
those, I've never seen that work.
yeah. I agree. I agree.
Escape or,
Yeah, that's what you. Interesting.
they'll crawl out usually.
So that's what this video shows. It's just showing it, pulling it straight out, no twisting, and that's what I recommend as well. But
I saw at a store the other day, incidentally, kind of like a bottle opener device that's got this narrow kind of angle thing that you kind of hook behind and pull. Have you seen that before?
I haven't seen that. I know that there are some little devices that are made, and some of them have a magnifying glass on them so that you can kind of see in there a little bit better. But I haven't seen like a hook type thing. Yeah.
Except for dogs,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that could be.
They sell them at the vets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in general, I think just the sharp-pointed tweezers can really help because you can get in there better. Pulling it straight out, wiping the site with alcohol can help. And then how long do you need to monitor it for? What are you monitoring for, the site of the
Lyme
tick?
disease, a couple of weeks at least.
Couple weeks at
They say
least.
7 to 14 days. You should
Yeah.
get a bullseye.
Yeah, this site actually, this was out of New York, but they actually say 30 days to watch the site for 30 days to see if there's the bullseye
But you don't
formation
always get
around
the
there.
bullseye.
Yeah, you don't always get that. So just like anything, if you become sick and if you have symptoms after being in the field, make sure you're clear with your doctor that where you've been working, mention the tick.
I would save the tick.
Yeah,
I know people that work in the fields and
Yeah.
you save them on like Scotch tape or something,
Mhm.
they'll stick, and then
yeah,
most counties will identify the tick for you, and you will test for Lyme disease because you don't want to get the Lyme disease.
yeah. I don't know who has the kit right now, but if you see in the kit, there is the tweezers are actually in a little vial that you could rip off a little bit of the tape that's in there and put it on there and put it in that vial. That would be an easy way to bring it back. Is there services here on campus? Does anyone know to test it? Because I've heard people at Berkeley say, send it to Davis. I don't know what exactly they mean, but
They identify it, but I don't know if they did one.
yeah. So that's a good thing also to consult with occupational health about. So we've had people call and be like, we got this, we'd really like to know, can you test it? It might be a case-by-case basis, but you might want to call and ask. This is another issue that comes up a lot is EpiPens and people having allergic reactions in the field. And certainly a lot of kids may be carrying EpiPens. A lot of people may already be prescribed. There's actually a new law that just went into place in California in January that allows trip leaders, researchers, basically anyone that has training, which includes the wilderness first responder training you were talking about, to get a prescription for EpiPens. So you no longer have to have an individual prescription. So I work pretty closely with our entomologists on campus at Berkeley. They used to have to say something like, well, I'm not sure if I have an allergy, I want to carry one just in case, and it's always this weird legal situation about whether you could legally use it for someone else. And now that has been remedied, and so there's better access to EpiPens if you get this training. And so I know UCLA just offered the training, we just had it in Berkeley. So if there's groups here that want to get the training, let me know, and I could try to help facilitate that through your medical department. And then you get a prescription. There's also a cheaper availability through CVS now. These used to be like $600-700 for a 2-pack, and now CVS came out with I think it's $109 for a 2-pack. So it's still expensive, but for a life-saving drug, makes it much more accessible for a lot of groups to have as a precaution. So, has anyone dealt with that situation, someone going into anaphylactic shock? Or it's pretty common. We've had it at the field stations. We've had a number of people that luckily were able to get to medical care quick enough, but this can be a life-saving drug if someone has a severe reaction and their throat starts to close. It can be really scary, and this is, again, epinephrine is a life-saving drug, so been some good news. Rattlesnakes, we have some groups, I'm sure you guys do here at Davis as well, that study rattlesnakes. They've developed some special, some specific protocols so they know exactly where the nearest medical care is that has anti-venom. Ideally, you're not working alone, because I haven't been bit by one, but I hear it's very painful, and the idea that you can actually, get yourself out and get to medical care, that's a big question mark in their plans, but knowing at least where you can go, I think, is a good precaution. Is this something you guys deal with a lot out here? Okay. Definitely down in the Mojave. I mean, certainly rattlesnakes are throughout California, in mountain areas, and then down in the desert. All right, mosquito-borne illnesses are definitely nothing new, but they've gotten a lot of press, Zika in particular, in the past year. So I'm sure many of you know a lot more about mosquitoes than I do, but it's important to understand, what mosquitoes are endemic in the area that you're working, whether they tend to bite at night or during the day, any specific precautions. For example, if you were going to these countries where malaria is still prevalent, that would be a good situation to talk to occupational health and get malaria prophylaxis to take while you're traveling, for example. So some of the general precautions about, your field sites, anything that can hold water for a couple days can breed mosquitoes. So, out at the reserves, here on campus, if you're staying in housing for a while during your field project, kind of making sure that there's not all this trash or things around you that can hold water, clearing that out can go a long way, because a lot of the mosquitoes don't actually travel very far. So if you manage some of these water sources right around you, that can go a long way. And then just like the other issues we were talking about with ticks, if you do get sick after you're traveling or working in the field, make sure that you communicate that to your doctor. All right. Getting back to the heat illness, we've talked about this a little bit already. There is a requirement in California that workers need to be provided access to water and shade when they're working outdoors. And there's special high heat procedures that are triggered at 95 degrees. Victor, yes, 95? You guys are probably at 95 for like a large part of the summer, right? Yeah, Berkeley, I've looked up the data, we hit 95 like 5 days out of the year, 6 days, but they're always on our biggest football days. Like they're always when there's a huge event happening at noon. So it's again, you probably all get more acclimated if you're spending time outdoors, but this can be a real big issue. And when I've been collecting kind of incidents from field researchers, at least from Berkeley, this comes up a lot when people are going down to Death Valley or out to the field and they're not acclimated. They extremely underestimate how much water they're going to need, and they don't bring enough. And it often impacts their work, and they need to come back early. Yeah, go ahead.
Another important thing with working with bees and drinking lots of water is I used to work somewhere where we actually got limited to how much water we could drink, so 10 liters, whatever that is in gallons. If you drink more water than that, you're going to flush all the good stuff out of your blood and you will collapse. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting at with that one sign. It's called hyponatremia. And if you're not eating, because I'm actually like that as well. Especially if it's hot, humid climates, I tend to like not be that hungry. I'm just thirsty and hot, and I forget to eat. And then you can have the other, you're drinking too much and it gets flushed out. And you can have a lot of the same symptoms of feeling nauseous, feeling weak that you get from dehydration. So yeah, finding that balance, but having it water available is important. There is an online training available through UC Davis, and Victor and I were talking about this earlier. There is a UC version that I was a part of with someone from Santa Barbara that's available, and we'll kind of see whether that can be available here as well. But it is an important, for most of us, a lot of it is stuff we're familiar with already, but especially as a supervisor and the planning and monitoring and making sure that there's a system where people are watching out for each other and they're familiar with the symptoms. That can go a long way to making like basic heat exhaustion from that advancing to heat stroke. Because really, people...
We do have that link on our website.
Great.
She's talking about the difference between a system-wide and a training.
Yeah.
We have a UC Davis specific one that's available through
Yeah.
the Services website.
And I mean, this regulation really went into place because there were a lot of ag workers, there were a lot of construction workers that were dying of heat stroke in California on the job, and it's completely preventable if people recognize those symptoms. And so recognizing the symptoms and taking a break in shade and not going back to work in heat is really critical. So that takes some leadership and some management from supervisors as well. Everyone should know their address and be able to get help. I see this a lot with field courses and with people that are going out into groups. There's like a really strong leader, and there's one person or maybe two people that have everything in check. And it's like, well, what if something happens with them? A lot of times other people don't even know where they are or where to get help or can explain how to get there. So it's really important to have a little bit of a briefing in the beginning for everyone to be able to describe where they are and to be competent enough to get help if needed. And then there's a lot of strategies to kind of mitigate the effects of heat. These are just some random pictures I've collected. And again, I imagine you guys are pretty good at it as well. Does anyone have some great solutions that they've found for staying cool working in heat out here? Some of the vineyards or some of the fields? Personal preferences? Yeah, go ahead.
I freeze giant jugs of water and throw them
Yep.
in the back of the car.
Yep.
And we have like 4 of those, so
Yeah.
they'll be completely melted by the time later.
Yeah. That's a great strategy. I worked at Redwood National Park, which you don't think it was getting that hot, but the inland parts do actually get pretty hot, and we would freeze the Nalgene bottles like almost to the top and fill it, and then it's like you have a steady supply of cold water. Because one of the issues here is that no one wants to drink lukewarm water. If you have a whole flat of water bottles in the trunk of your car, in the back of your truck that's hot, no one really wants to drink that. It's really helpful to have cold, icy water, a cooler, or stuff that's frozen. So that's a great example. Any others? Yeah.
Just a question back to our conversation about getting reimbursement for water bottles. And
Yeah.
that's a challenge because that's like an entertainment expense.
Yeah,
So,
I think it needs to be built in as a safety expense and a precaution to have. I mean, you can tell everyone in your group to bring some water, but I think as a leader, it's important. It's important to have like an igloo, a cooler, or to have water available as well. So, I mean, I'd encourage you to work with your department on that if it continues to be a challenge. Victor has let me know that they've had some problems with that. I'm trying to figure out whether we can. I mean, it seems kind of a crazy thing to need a whole UC policy on, but like reimbursement for a lot of these things, like the satellite phones, often can't be reimbursed on research funds. Sometimes the wilderness first aid training, water, a lot of these things that just seem like a good idea. If we can budget for it up front, that'd be good.
Some boilerplate text from
Yeah.
that we can use to submit with our reimbursements that
Yeah.
doesn't get kicked back because it's a food or an entertainment expense.
Yeah.
That was
And I've thought about it. I mean, I think we could just do an interpretation of the reg that it's required by state law to provide water, and therefore it should be included.
Well,
But
I think one of Victor's
Yeah.
questions late this past summer was required for employees, but then when you have students out
Yeah.
there, if somebody decides to argue that finer point that you don't
Yeah.
have to provide it for the students.
I try not to get into that. I try to just promote the best practices for everyone, and because people's status changes, sometimes they're grad students, sometimes they're students, whether they're getting paid or not, I think we want to try to support everyone. But yeah, from a reimbursement perspective, sometimes they're much more stringent about it. Yeah.
I put water on my travel. I've had that before. I put it on the corporate card, and they said it's a part of supply money, whatever
Yeah.
you supply.
Good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's really
Yeah, I think
depends.
different people do different things, and we're hoping that we can get somebody centrally to kind of go, okay,
Yeah.
here's some best practices, and this is what kind of works, so this is what you all should be
Yeah.
aware of.
I think that's something that, yeah, I still want to support. I'm trying to work on this sort of broader field operations plan or manual that kind of refers to a lot of these challenges and gives some like interpretation and support, and that's definitely one of them. That I think will be helpful, because often if you can like point to a piece of paper and see like, look, this, you know, someone's considered this before, and have some backup, that can help. Quick here. So this is one of my favorite places in the state. Anyone know where this is? Say that again?
Trinity Alps.
Ooh, closer. Where were you going to guess? It's in California. It's Lassen, yeah. I've been going to Lassen since I was a kid, and we try to go up there every Memorial Day, and I love it. I always look forward to it. So I have some scenarios that we're going to go through in small groups to kind of finish up our workshop. Just go through the scenario. We'll talk about them for, 5 or 10 minutes or so. Just discuss what you would do in this situation and what some resources are that might help you. Would you all like to start? Everyone had a different scenario, so can you just briefly share your scenario and how you're going to deal with it? Yeah.
So a group of 4 out in ag land, it's hot out. How will you check on each other and meet up? No cell service. We said obviously radios, FRSs, if you're, there's 4 of you, it's pretty cheap. Have a meeting time to check in at the water and shade spot, so you have water available to people. Transportation, we thought, if you have your truck there, you have coolers and ice available, you have air conditioning, you can turn on the truck or vehicle or whatever, and then know the weather beforehand.
Follow the weather.
Yeah.
So having a plan to check in at a certain time.
Right.
Yeah,
Obviously.
and how long that is, kind of depends probably on how hot it is and what else is going on. But yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Having radio so you can talk to each other. Definitely, if you're within a mile of each other in ag land, it should work. It should be reliable, but you'll get to know based on experience. Okay, great, excellent. So I have a couple random little freebies that I've picked along the way. You guys get a whistle.
Awesome.
So what's the distress signal if you have a whistle if you need help? Anyone know what the standard?
Is it one long, one short, one long?
I've just been told 3, but that works. 3 whistles, but that sounds good. So say that again.
I think it's long.
Long, short, long. Long, short, long. 3 whistles. If you're potentially in ag land, if you guys all had a whistle, you can hear these pretty far. Please don't blow it right now.
No.
Definitely in the backcountry, if people are going off, if you have groups, that are going off and people get disoriented pretty easily, that could be a way to kind of at least alert other people.
Good for the city, too.
Good for the city, potentially, yeah, you never know. In a crowd lately, right? Having a big pole like a lightsaber or something in crowds, that's our strategy. Okay, how about you were all in the same group? Okay, how about the next group right here? The stop and think about it and don't just follow your leader is probably what I would suggest. And I think one part of group outdoor decision making is that you want it to be a group decision, and you may have there may be varying levels of comfort and expertise in your group, and really you want to make decisions based on, I don't want to say the weakest person, but the least experienced person. They need to be comfortable with what you're doing, and so that can be difficult sometimes when you're, outdoors and having to still succeed in your mission, but it's important for everyone in the group to be able to say, stop, I don't think this is safe, is there another way we can do this, and then kind of evaluate it. And so I think everyone would like to promote that type of expedition, that type of research group, and so having some discussions up front can really help to set the tone for that. So you're not just dealing with it then, there's kind of a plan to do that. So cool, thanks. Great suggestions, yeah. And having some emergency supplies in your car. Sleeping bags, extra dry clothes, having some of that because conditions can change and you could get stuck out there. In the United States, the majority of search and rescue incidents are for people that are out on a day trip and they're not prepared and they don't have some of those extra things. They didn't bring enough food, they didn't bring extra layers. So especially when you're traveling in cold conditions, it's important to have extra of all of that type of stuff. And in the wilderness first aid training, you do learn a lot more about hypothermia. You learn about staying dry. You learn about how to manage that with like warm water bottles and how to keep people warm. So that's definitely a skill that can be practiced and you can learn more about. That would be covered probably a lot more in wilderness first aid than you would get in standard first aid. So yeah, great suggestions though. All right, for you mentioned feet and putting too many socks. And one thing about when you have too many socks, you get hot spots. I'm sure all of you guys have had hot spots and blisters. This is a cool trick I learned recently for feet and blisters. So you know that KT stuff that you see people use? It was like, seemed like the Olympics was practically sponsored by them because they have all this tape all over. That stuff actually makes great sort of barriers for shoes if you're starting to get a hot spot because it's designed to be on for like multiple days. So you can cut that, you can make it small. It's kind of like moleskin. Moleskin can be great too, and then the padding can be really good. But kind of learning how to take care of your feet when you're traveling, when you're outdoors, a lot of that can really prevent basic things from becoming big things. So I'm a big fan of that KT tape.
You know what works well for blistering?
Yeah.
If you do a lot of hiking is to wear toe socks.
Toe socks?
That's
Where they go in
all
between?
for runners
Interesting.
wear and stuff, because your
Yeah.
toes, it protects them from sliding against each other.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
It works really well.
They feel so weird though.
They
But
do,
yeah, I'll
yeah,
try it out
I've
sometime.
never had a blister where it went
That's
on
great.
those.
That's a good suggestion.
It's good for cold weather.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
you wear that
Right,
underneath your
exactly.
other sock.
That's
You
true.
should layer your sock anyway
Yeah.
if it's colder.
Yeah, everyone's got different strategies, but I'll try it out sometime. Thank you. Okay, how about the group back here?
So we had an international system
Mhm.
assess the situation.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge on field trips in general that you're there to do work, but there's also a lot of free time involved, and people have different norms on how they spend their free time, right? So there could be a lot of issues that come up, and how you support your staff and sort of what sort of are acceptable activities and what is kind of jeopardizing everyone's safety, and that's really tricky. There's no clear answer on that. In this situation in particular, I mean, there's a lot of avid athletes, people that like need to get their run in like in any situation, and that can be challenging because there's a lot of places where it's just not safe to do that or you don't feel comfortable, and that's probably something good to talk about in advance before you're on a trip. And then in this situation in particular, the eating issues, a lot of young university students have eating disorders. I mean, that's a very common thing, and any kind of mental health, personal issues, pre-existing conditions that people are dealing with in their normal lives, when you travel, you're doing field work, they may be exaggerated and become a huge issue and can be very disruptive and worrisome about their own health. So those are, there are resources on campus certainly available to help with those, but those are also huge challenges related to field research, and I'm trying to compile various resources to help. There's actually a number of campuses that are offering, in addition to first aid, like physical first aid, like mental first aid classes and opportunities for leaders and students and instructors to get more skills on how to help each other with various issues. And again, it becomes exaggerated when you're out in the field and you're away from your normal campuses and your normal routines. So I just put that one in to acknowledge that, yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah, so I think it goes back to setting the tone for a safe trip and having some discussions up front about what your boundaries, what your rules are. There are definitely, Berkeley manages a field station in Maria in the South Pacific, and they have some pretty clear, like, no hitchhiking. They have rules up front that are like, I'm sure people still do it, but at least there's like a written rule and ramifications, and if there's consequences, you kind of lose a lot of credibility if you don't acknowledge the incident and at least talk about it. And I mean, no one wants to have to send anyone home, but at the same time, if you're managing students or a group for a long time, if there's a person that's always pushing the boundaries and it's affecting everyone else, that can be a challenge. But it's helpful to have policies or an agreement up front about your project on sort of what's acceptable. That can help to manage it when it does come up, because it does come up. It comes up a lot, right, for people that are teaching field courses, those type of situations. Cool.
You're super excited to finally be starting your field work. You're supposed to fly to Haiti tomorrow, but a hurricane is forming and a storm watch has been issued. Models are uncertain, but your site may be in the storm path. What do you do? What factors are important to consider? So we said that, first of all, think about delaying your trip if that's an option. Second of all, if the planes are going to fly to Haiti, then they're only going to fly if it's okay. So the flight itself is probably going to be fine. But then once you're actually there, considering going out to your field sites, you know, wait, look at the conditions, wait for the models to be more certain. And then we also talked about how you might be feeling comfortable putting yourself in harm's way, but as a foreigner going in there, then you're actually putting more burden on them trying to get you out as well. So you have to think about how your actions are affecting other people.
That's a great point. Are you going to be able to help in some way with the situation? Are you possibly able to bring stuff and help? Do you have skills that might help? Or are you going to be an additional burden on an already stressed system? If they don't have health care, if they don't have roads, I was in Hurricane Andrew when I was a kid in Miami. There's no services in the city. You're going to come in and you're going to do your field work, you know, like there's people are dealing with stuff, and is that ethically okay? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and there's no right answer, but there's a lot of things to consider if their normal services are disrupted because of a huge disaster or something. You're going to be bummed out if you needed to do it at a certain time, but that seems like a reasonable time to delay your project or alter it in some way, or talk to local resources about maybe, you know, finding a good solution, and talking to your risk manager in those type of situations about your flight and your insurance and those type of things, and flexibility would help as well.
So your field course is in Death Valley for the weekend. A student slices his hand while cutting a bagel. What do you do, and what factors are important to consider? Obviously, deal with the emergent or your staff problem. Hopefully, it's not too bad, but still, we go back to that lowest common denominator issue where this student may have issues with blood loss and passing out. Students watching may have issues, so you got to take that into account and kind of start there at the lowest place. Okay, well, the blood stopped, let's move on. Make sure you're in a good place. It may trigger evacuation, so you got to think about how you're getting out. Do you need assistance getting out? Where's your nearest signal? How do you contact anybody? Where's the nearest help?
There's a lot of variables. It may be able to be managed very easily, but it may be also that if just with that one wound, you've used up all your first aid supplies, you need to kind of monitor the person, but you feel like, you know, this person at least, or, you know, maybe there's more than one vehicle and one leader in the group. Maybe someone else can go to medical care and come back. Maybe the whole group has to leave. There's a lot of variables, but even a simple, kitchen injuries happen a lot. And so even a simple,
when you get back, pre-cut your bagels before you
pre-cut your bagels, right? And yeah, people are often eating together. Again, going back to the free time, there's a lot of other things besides your actual research where people might get hurt. So even something simple like that can be a challenge. And cleaning out a wound in the desert, like if you use all your water to clean up the wound, you might not have enough water left for everyone to drink. So there's a lot of factors.
But you have that syringe.
I would use that syringe in that, and I would clean it very well, yes.
So we need a water bottle. I don't know why.
Sorry. What are you guys going to get? You can have some gear tape.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Gear tape. No, it's not for, it's tenacious gear tape. Not necessarily for people, but for gear that's broken or fixed. And actually the little duct tape that's in the first aid kit, I mean, you need to fix things all the time. I mean, I know when I did field work, we cared a lot more about our equipment and our data than ourselves. There was all kinds of little things that you need to do, so that can be helpful. Okay, last couple ones. Do you want to, who's got one right here?
So we have, your field team is on a multi-day backcountry trip. It's been raining, someone has extreme tooth pain, and everyone is ready to go home. You decide to take a shortcut across the ridge to get back to the car more quickly. Is this a good idea? We determined that it's probably not the best idea, that going off trail or whatever with a tired crew and all that, you're just more likely to get hurt, other people hurt, or what have you. Also, if it's raining and you're going up to the top of a ridge, it's probably even worse weather up there, and if could be lightning or whatever, it might not be a good idea. Then we were also asked to discuss 5 tips for reading a map and not getting lost. And one would be to be orienting yourself with landmarks such as peaks or, you know, lakes, etc. So you're constantly orienting yourself, and you have a compass with you so you can further orient yourself.
Hopefully you have a map. You actually have a map and aren't just relying on
And that it is a topo map, so
exactly.
You can read.
You could see those streams.
If you're going over a ridge, you probably want to make sure it's not a cliff on the other side, or, you know, find the gentlest way down. So knowing how to read the scale and the topo elevations, etc. avoid traveling at night, that would be
Definitely.
a pretty bad thing to do.
Definitely.
Also, if you
Even
are
most
going-
evacuations, they won't do at night. It's so dangerous to move people and get around at night. In most cases, you're going to shelter and wait for light, yeah.
And if you are going cross country, then you can leave cairns or whatever ways to like mark where you've been. So
Yeah,
to
that could be
avoid
helpful.
loss.
Great. So you all got poison oak when you left the trail and went across. So I got a little packet of Technu for you. We buy that at large scale in my household, so I'm a fan of it. But I do like those little packets because they're pretty easy to put in your kit and wash with. You up at Bodega, do you guys have a lot of poison oak?
I do in my yard.
In your yard, yeah. And there's in the East Bay where I live in the Oakland Hills, we have a ton of poison oak. I mean, that's just throughout California. Yeah, it's all over the place. You gotta watch out for that. Oh, I'm sorry. One last one, yeah.
It's 3 p.m. in the afternoon and hotter than you expected. You're feeling symptoms of heat exhaustion and you're running out of water, but you really want to finish your work. It is a long drive back to the field station on a dirt road. So first of all, we talk about those symptoms of exhaustion, of heat exhaustion, because I personally have never had that. So we were discussing about how the first
How you feel, yeah.
Yeah, you like feel really hot and you start sweating, and then when you stop sweating, you start getting super red and feeling bad. I have a couple of friends out there vomiting.
Yep, vomiting, nausea, fatigue.
And so we said, like, okay, we should try to communicate with somebody at the field station, explaining very quickly the situation before heading back to the field station. So in case you can make it,
Yeah.
and see if we can make halfway, and they can bring some more water. And also look for a shady spot if there is.
Yeah, try to cool down if you can.
And I don't know, there's not much to do when you're
Well,
running out of water.
I think this is a perfect example of pushing the limits. It's like you want to finish your work, but people aren't feeling well, you're really hot, and people push limits, and that's when they get into trouble. And so if you have NoGo criteria, you've talked about it, you need to stick with it and say, okay, yeah, we have the perfect situation right now, we need to finish this, but you know what, we're going to have to come back tomorrow. And being a strong leader and making that decision is critical. Let's see what I have for you. I have some little mosquito repellent wipes right there for you. So thank you for sharing all of those. Those are all real incidents, more or less, of things that people have dealt with, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with similar things. We're finishing up right now. There was a couple things that I didn't get to that I just want to flip through real quick. We will send out a follow-up email with some of the resources we talked about, and then certainly if you have suggestions moving forward, suggestions for the field safety plan, suggestions in general of initiatives that would help support your work, please let me know. One of the reasons I'm going out and talking to people is so that I can hear, like, getting funding for wilderness first aid, getting funding for those things. Those have all been results of discussions that have happened. So let me know. And then also, Davis is actually hiring someone within their EH&S department to help support field research. And so there will be more support locally here as well, which I think will be good. So I am available. These are a couple projects I've worked on where we've done actual hazard assessments in the field. We have people that are going down into confined spaces where it could be hazardous environments where we can do monitoring, and they can carry monitors themselves. I did a project up at Hopland with dust exposure during clean barnouts. So there's expertise within EH&S to come out and do more in-depth assessments of certain work sites. If that would be helpful for you, reach out for that. UC Forestry, they work with a ton of equipment. There's a lot of equipment training, handling of fuels, large equipment, issues like that. I'm just kind of going to go through some various programs that are within UC that have a lot of subject matter experts that are available. So if there's issues that you think you could use assistance with or would just like to consult with, let me know and I can help put you in touch with some of these people. We have a huge scientific diving program. We actually have the largest in the country as far as number of dives within the UC system. So out of Bodega, Scripps, Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara. So some great resources there. This is Central Sierra Snow Lab that's up on Donner Summit that's managed by UC Berkeley. There's also Sierra Nevada Research Institute. There's a lot of stuff going up in the mountains not too far from here. A lot of weather station monitoring and equipment. This is Sage Hen Reserve. This snowcat actually has the University of California seal on the side of it, which I wish I would have gotten a better picture of because I just think it's really cool. But they're up there. They are buried right now. They have so much snow. It's unbelievable. But there's a lot of collaboration with Fish and Wildlife and other agencies. They were releasing this bear out there. This one I just want to mention real quick. This was a fatality. It wasn't a UC researcher, but it was someone in the Tetons that was working alone in a grizzly, known area, and was mauled and killed. And OSHA actually investigated as a workplace incident, which is kind of unusual for field incidents. We don't actually have a lot of precedent for that. But they did call out the lack of appropriate training, the lack of a communication plan, no check-in procedures, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about as a workplace requirement for this type of work. So it's kind of a good example of realistic challenges that people are facing, but what the standard practice is that is supported. And a lot more agencies, Fish and Wildlife, National Park, a lot of them are requiring more safety plans and training for people working on their lands. So don't be surprised if you see that if you're working in some of the public agency lands. Victor had gotten into this. This is some other equipment safety. Tower climbing. Are any of you climbing towers or working at height? We have a lot of people within the UC actually accessing weather station equipment and climbing up towers. So I'm trying to schedule actually a specialized training for that in May. This was some equipment that was sent from a station to our excess and salvage, shrink wrapped like that. It was so gross. The rodent feces and cleaning out old sheds, equipment, that's a serious biosafety concern besides just being gross that is relevant. And so, being aware of hantavirus and having good work practices on how you address this is very applicable and very prudent. Don't just create a huge dust storm and clean things up. Definitely stop and make a plan on how to do that and consult with EH&S for guidance, and especially for if it's really heavily contaminated, to get a respirator fitted for you. Have you guys noticed what's wrong with the picture on the right yet? Can you guys see that? Yeah. Yeah, so I came across that at a field station. And the person was, what do you think they were doing with that? Why do you think you would put a razor blade on the end of a power drill? They had to mix algae samples. So there's certainly better ways to do that, right? So we called the PI, and I hate to, I don't want to embarrass people because, he actually had the chemical goggles there. He clearly thought a little bit about it, but that is a serious potential, very scary situation right there if that razor blade came off. In the cupboard was a smoothie mixer that's guarded. Excellent way to do it, right? That has the guarded, you guys know what I'm talking about? Much better way to do it. He just didn't ask or didn't know about it or something. So certainly, having some steps where you're talking, when people are working off-site and remote, a lot of people have expertise. They're going to be resourceful. They're going to find out solutions. But there should be some discussion going on and some hazard assessment of the proper way to do that. So definitely SOPs that are relevant in labs here are also relevant when you're leaving campus, and understanding what equipment you're doing is important. What you're using is important. These are some resources I've been coming across as I kind of delve into this more that have been really helpful. There's actually a number of sort of professional organizations. This is a geologist, Association of Petroleum Geologists, that has a really good resource for field safety. This is kind of an interesting read. It was written by some professors out of Colorado and I think Ohio State about just anecdotal issues. So it's kind of an interesting read, but touches on a lot of issues, both from a research compliance perspective and physical health. This is an excellent field risk management report from Arctic Science from the NSF, and it also gives some good, if you're getting funding from NSF, it gives some good guidance on the structure of what they expect and checklists and support to, as we've been talking about, to integrate the budget and the planning for field safety into your budget up front so that it can be covered by your NSF grants. Up here on the right is the Forest Service Health and Safety Handbook. So a lot of those equipment issues, they have good guidance. And then I use the ANR from Ag and Natural Resources, their safety notes quite a bit for those of you that do ag work. They've put together quite a variety of technical information. We don't necessarily need to reinvent something. They have a lot of guidance there to support their research and extension centers and ag work. So the ANR site's a good resource. And then NOLS, again, going back to National Outdoor Leadership School, they actually do a risk management conference every year. And I've been able to get a lot of good resources out of that. So one of the key things that I got out of that one resource, Arctic conditions, certainly harsher than what most of us deal with, but I think that these lessons learned, or these situations can apply to a lot of things. So lack of field experience, pushing the limits like we were talking about before, being complacent or cavalier, or just dumb bad luck also can sometimes lead. I want to finish up, someone had brought up driving safety and vehicle safety. We haven't touched on that, but how you get into the field can be likely the most dangerous part of your whole trip. Here again, the policies differ on each campus as far as driving safety training, how you check out vehicles, whether you're taking personal vehicles. Risk management is a great resource to understand the insurance coverage and to understand a lot of those rules. So if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to reach out to your risk management office, or risk services it might be called here.
Yeah, risk management.
Risk management. And what about driver safety training? Is there something centrally offered here? We don't in Berkeley either, unless that's part of your job, but I've been compiling a lot more resources as far as like off-road driving in winter conditions. ANR has some stuff driving on farm roads. I've been trying to compile more of that, and I'll try to get some of that guidance out to you. It may just be that, before your trip, that you have a discussion about checking the things in your equipment, checking this, talking about speed, having like 2 people that are kind of balancing how long people are driving, so you're not driving long stretches overnight, setting some norms up front, that can go a long way. Yeah, it gets a little complicated. I know that we have some procedures in place for driving into Mexico, because there's a lot of group from the Southern California that go down there. I haven't heard specifically about challenges with Canada, but yeah, are you involved with risk management directly to figure that out?
We need to start.
Yeah, I would talk to them and see what your options are, because I'm sure other people have dealt with it before. Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I'm putting together some resources, so there will be more to come. I really just started this project, and there's a whole range of issues besides just the physical safety issues and a lot of the scenarios we've talked about. Field course instructors that are managing long-term trips where people are out for like 9 weeks, or some of these things, they go through a whole range of issues. So there will certainly be more to come as far as technical guidance and central resources. I do want to just acknowledge this issue as well. The field stations, I think, are really stepping up with sort of code of conduct expectations and promoting resources for sexual harassment, because that is a huge issue in field research in general, in field courses, and hasn't really been acknowledged centrally that much. So there was a publication that came out a couple years ago. NPR gave it press. There was a lot of press on it that's kind of highlighted that. So like at Irvine, they've actually come up with a set code of conduct, and they have other resources available. Their Department of Biology has it posted on their website. There's like an advisor that can consult with things. So there's a lot going on in that realm as well. And especially if you're a field course instructor, it's important to understand, different scenarios, who to report to, and what your responsibilities are there. Okay, we covered a lot of issues. I'm sorry that we went over into lunch. I apologize. It's hard sometimes to get through all the scenarios. This is actually a really big group. For the stuff I've done so far, it's more been usually around 20 to 30 people, but I appreciate you guys all coming and participating. Are there any questions or burning issues that you'd like to have right now? Okay. I have the roster, so I'll work with Becky on sending out a follow-up email. So think about some of the things that we've covered, how they apply to you. If you see next actions and steps, please let me know, or please reach out to me about any of these resources, and I can try to help bridge some of those gaps. Take a look at that field safety plan. If you have suggestions, give us feedback, because like I said, they're going to be hiring someone here in EH&S that part of their role will be to support field researchers. So the more input to help steer that, I think the more successful it'll be. Okay? Thank you, everyone.